The RMS Titanic is often remembered for the glittering opulence of its first-class decks, the grand staircases, the fine dining rooms, the sparkling chandeliers, and the leisurely promenade walks on the upper decks. And it is often remembered too for the tragic way it met its end in the North Atlantic on that fateful night of April 14 to December 15, 1912. But there existed a different, quieter world below that glamour, a world that has been largely overshadowed by stories of luxury or catastrophe, the realm of second-class passengers. These were the people who were neither at the pinnacle of wealth nor at the brink of survival. They occupied a social stratum that was moderately comfortable, orderly, and in many ways, meticulously regulated. To understand their experience is to immerse oneself in the muted rhythm of life on one of the largest ships ever built at the time. Second-class passengers were not servants or laborers, but they were not aristocrats or industrial magnates either. They were teachers, clerks, travelers, small business owners, nurses, and other professionals. Some were British traveling home or to new opportunities abroad. Others were American, Scandinavian, or Irish, each carrying the quiet weight of their own stories, ambitions, and anxieties. They had paid a fare that, in 1912, ranged roughly from £13 to £20 to £6, or $65 to $130, a moderate sum then, for accommodations that were considered comfortable by most contemporary standards, though modest when compared to the first-class extravagance directly above them. The second-class cabins themselves were straightforward, but carefully designed. Most were arranged along the Titanic's port and starboard sides, facing either inward toward a narrow corridor or outward to the sea, where a small porthole would offer a glimpse of the waves. Furniture was simple yet sturdy: a narrow bed, a washstand, a wardrobe, and occasionally a small writing desk. There was an emphasis on order, hygiene, and a certain muted elegance: polished wood, brass fittings, and neatly pressed linens, but nothing ornate or extravagant. These spaces were, in a sense, the embodiment of the second-class ethos: practical, respectable, and unpretentious. For many passengers, life in these cabins involved early mornings and regimented schedules. Unlike first-class passengers, whose days could begin and end with leisurely promenades and extended meals, second-class passengers often had routines dictated by practicality. Breakfast was taken in the second-class dining saloon, a space that was understated yet functional. The saloon was lined with wooden chairs and tables, spaced adequately to allow for movement but not intended for social display. Meals were served at set times, and the menu, while far from Spartan, emphasized nutritious, familiar fare rather than indulgence. One might have poached eggs, cold meats, simple breads, and tea or coffee in the morning, followed by soups, stews, and roasted meats for lunch and dinner. Meals were communal but subdued, fostering a quiet sense of shared routine rather than social competition. The daily life of a second-class passenger was as much about observation as it was about participation. The second-class promenade deck, a narrow stretch above the cabins, provided a limited but valued space for exercise and fresh air. Here, one could observe the Atlantic, stretching endlessly in pale blue or grey, watch the ship's wake frothing behind the propellers, or note the movement of seagulls hovering in the distance. For those accustomed to towns and cities, the monotony of the open sea created a peculiar sense of suspended time. Conversations often revolved around practical matters: news from home, upcoming ports of call, or shared observations about the ship's machinery or itinerary. It was a measured, almost methodical pace, punctuated by the occasional excitement of a first glimpse of land or the arrival of mail and messages delivered by the ship's purser. Education and culture still had a place aboard the Titanic for those in second class, though far less conspicuously than in first class. Many passengers brought books and periodicals, and small gatherings might be held in lounges where reading, quiet conversation, and card games occupied the hours. Music could be heard occasionally, though it was more restrained than the orchestral performances of the upper decks. The sense of decorum was strong. One dressed for meals and social interaction, though not to the heights of fashion and display seen in first class. It was a delicate balance, comfortable, respectable, and just distant enough from labor or hardship to preserve the notion of gentility without the ostentation of wealth. Travelers often use second-class accommodations as a means of observation and learning. Unlike first-class passengers who insulated themselves within social circles of similar status, second-class passengers encountered a wider variety of people and backgrounds. Conversations at meals could range from discussions of farming practices in rural Ireland to teaching methods in British schools, or even to quiet reflections on immigration and the pursuit of opportunity in distant lands. This created a subtle but rich tapestry of human experience, where lives of modest means intersected briefly in the shared space of the Titanic. Yet, the quieter, structured life of second-class passengers also hid certain vulnerabilities. They were not immune to the ship's potential dangers, and the design of the Titanic reflected prevailing assumptions about social hierarchies. Life-saving equipment, such as lifeboats, was primarily oriented toward first-class passengers and crew priorities. Second-class passengers were not deliberately neglected, but their social position often placed them in a middling category, visible enough to receive comfort and attention, but less likely to access the privileges reserved for the wealthiest. This subtle social calculus would, in the event of disaster, prove to be a grim determinant in survival chances. One of the most overlooked aspects of second-class life was the quiet endurance required by long stretches at sea. While the upper decks offered visual spectacle and social entertainment, second-class passengers often contended with the repetitive hum of the engines, the faint but persistent smell of coal from the boiler rooms below, and the occasional vibration of the ship's massive propellers. These elements, though minor, created a daily rhythm that influenced mood and activity. Some passengers wrote journals or letters, documenting observations of the ocean, the ship, and the people around them. Others engaged in card games or crosswords, seeking a gentle distraction from the monotony of the voyage. In this way, the second-class experience was a study in human patience, resilience, and the subtle joys of ordinary life. The weather and environmental conditions also shaped second-class routines. On colder days, layers of clothing were necessary even inside the enclosed promenades or lounges. Passengers who ventured out onto the decks had to navigate wind, spray, and the occasional biting chill of the North Atlantic. On warmer, calmer days, the decks could provide a rare opportunity for leisurely observation, sunbathing, or quiet conversation. Even the small windows in the cabins offered a connection to the outside world, a portal to shifting skies and rolling waves, which became a silent companion for reflection and, at times, nostalgia. The unassuming elegance of second-class life was mirrored in the interactions with crew members. Cabin stewards and dining staff maintained an orderly environment, ensuring that spaces were clean, meals were delivered promptly, and passengers' minor needs were met with efficiency. Unlike first-class attendants, who might develop personal relationships with the wealthiest travelers, second-class staff maintained a professional, courteous distance, reinforcing the structured, predictable atmosphere that characterized this level of service. In essence, life in Titanic's second class was a delicate balance of comfort, order, and modest luxury. Passengers were neither excluded from society nor indulged by it. They existed in a middle space, a microcosm of the early 20th century middle class. There was dignity in the routines, small pleasures in meals and walks, and a shared understanding of collective experience. Yet, beneath the calm surface, there lingered a quiet tension. How would this microcosm respond in the face of the unpredictable and immense forces of the ocean? Could the careful order of second-class routines withstand the sudden chaos of a disaster that would not discriminate based on social class? As the Titanic sliced through the North Atlantic, propelled by powerful engines and guided by careful navigation, the passengers of second class carried on with their days, largely unaware of the iceberg that awaited them. They read, conversed, dined, and walked, believing in the reliability of technology, the competence of the crew, and the orderliness of the voyage. And yet, an unspoken question hovered over this quiet community. What would happen when the routine, the very essence of their security, was violently interrupted? By the second day of the Titanic's voyage, the rhythms of second-class life were well established. Cabin stewards had already memorized the names and preferences of their passengers. Dining tables had been assigned, and the promenade deck had begun to serve as a quiet social hub. Unlike the sprawling, ornate lounges of first class, the second-class public areas offered a restrained elegance, with polished wood paneling, heavy curtains, and a sense of order that made passengers feel secure and included. The daily routine began with breakfast, served promptly in the second-class dining saloon. Meals were structured with precision, an assortment of breads, cereals, and eggs for those who preferred a lighter start, and more filling options like sausages, bacon, and porridge for those seeking heartier sustenance. Tea and coffee were poured with regularity, and small conversations, careful, polite, and often repetitive, filled the room. Passengers compared ports of departure, speculated about the weather, or discussed their occupations. Unlike the expansive freedom of first-class socializing, these interactions were limited by both space and social expectation. Each person navigated a delicate etiquette, balancing friendliness with respectability. Evenings were quieter, with candle-lit cabins offering a private space for reading, letter writing, or reflection. Many second-class passengers brought books or periodicals with them, often choosing titles that allowed for gentle mental engagement rather than excitement. Novels were read slowly, sentences savored, while journals recorded observations of both the voyage and the subtleties of human behavior. Writing was a common pastime, both as a means of staying connected to home and as a meditative activity to pass the otherwise uneventful hours at sea. While structured routines provided comfort, the second-class world was also shaped by subtle social pressures. Passengers were acutely aware of their place on the ship, positioned between the opulence of first class and the more utilitarian spaces below. Etiquette mattered: how one dressed for meals, how one greeted fellow passengers on the promenade, and how one interacted with the crew all carried weight. Conversations occasionally reflected unspoken anxieties about upward mobility, the desire to appear respectable, and the fear of being perceived as too casual or too pretentious. This constant negotiation of middle-class decorum defined much of the interpersonal life in second class. For some passengers, the voyage offered a rare chance to escape the demands of daily life on land. Many were teachers or small business owners accustomed to long hours, often with little personal leisure. The steady pace of the Titanic allowed them to experience a controlled form of freedom, waking late on calm days, walking the decks with few interruptions, and engaging in quiet conversations. Yet even in this relative calm, the ship's environment imposed constraints. Corridors were narrow, spaces were shared, and privacy was always limited. Cabin walls were thin enough to carry the sound of footsteps, snoring, or distant conversations, reminding passengers that their retreat was communal as well as personal. Social dynamics were further complicated by the presence of families, solo travelers, and friends traveling together. Families navigated the challenges of maintaining routine for children, ensuring meals and walks were orderly, and managing the confined space of cabins. Solo travelers often gravitate toward shared spaces, quietly observing others while remaining unobtrusive. Friendships sometimes emerge from shared interests, books, music, or card games, but these bonds were typically polite and contained by the formality of the environment. The second-class world was one of restrained intimacy, where connections were meaningful yet never entirely private. One striking aspect of life in second class was the reliance on observation and small routines to create a sense of security. Passengers often monitored the comings and goings of the crew, the functioning of the engines, and even the movement of the waves. Cabin windows provided a visual anchor, a tiny glimpse of the infinite Atlantic that gave passengers a sense of spatial awareness and temporal rhythm. Exercise on the promenade deck, walking back and forth for an hour or two, was both practical and calming, a means to preserve health and mental stability during the long voyage. Meals remained central not just for nourishment, but for social interaction. Lunchtime brought a sense of predictability. Passengers knew they would be seated in assigned spaces, served in a methodical order, and expected to follow polite conversational norms. Service was attentive but efficient, emphasizing respect and reliability over showmanship. Staff learned passengers' preferences. Some preferred eggs cooked a certain way. Others favored tea with precise amounts of milk and sugar. This small attentiveness reinforced the structured atmosphere of second-class life. In quieter moments, Passengers reflected on the broader significance of their journey. Many were emigrating to new opportunities abroad, especially to the United States or Canada. Others traveled for education, business, or leisure. There was an underlying awareness that the voyage was a bridge between past and future, a suspended period of transition where daily routine temporarily replaced the unpredictability of life on land. This awareness manifested subtly in conversations, diaries, and letters, questions about family left behind, anxieties about finding work or accommodation, and hopes for the new life that awaited them. Despite this sense of optimism, the Atlantic itself introduced subtle pressures that shaped daily life. Rough seas or sudden squalls required passengers to adapt quickly. Coats and hats for wind, careful footing on slick decks, and attention to the stability of personal belongings. Even in calm conditions, the steady vibration and low hum of the engines reminded passengers of the immense machine they had entrusted themselves to. Some found comfort in this hum, a steady heartbeat of progress, while others could not help but note its monotony and the slight unease it inspired. Beyond these routines, second-class passengers witnessed the inner workings of the ship in ways first-class travelers rarely did. They might glimpse the crew descending to lower decks, hear the rhythmic clanging of coal shovels in the boiler rooms, or notice the faint smell of coal smoke carried upward by ventilation. These sensory details were minor irritations to some, points of curiosity to others, but together they created a more tangible connection to the physical operation of the Titanic. Unlike first-class passengers, who largely remained insulated from such realities, second-class travelers had a more visceral awareness of the machinery and labor that made the voyage possible. On some days, small recreational activities punctuated the routine. Card games, chess matches, or quiet music in lounges offered modest entertainment. Passengers shared brief stories, jokes, and observations about ports they had visited or intended to visit. On warm, calm afternoons, children could be seen under the watchful eye of parents, running along deck, quays, or peering at the water below. These moments created a sense of community, though it was always constrained by formality and space. Yet, amidst these routines, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty. Every passenger, consciously or not, understood that the ocean was unpredictable. Even the most meticulously planned voyage could be interrupted by mechanical failure, weather, or accident. This awareness existed quietly, shaping conversations and behaviors without overtly disturbing the calm surface of daily life. Passengers continued their routines precisely because the structure provided a sense of control in an environment that was ultimately vast and indifferent. As the Titanic pressed further into the North Atlantic, the contrast between perceived security and underlying vulnerability became more pronounced. Second-class passengers maintained their routines, walked their promenades, dined with propriety, and observed the waves, all while unknowingly inching closer to one of the most infamous maritime disasters in history. The very routines that brought comfort, strict schedules, orderly meals, polite social interaction, could not prepare them for the sudden chaos that awaited. And yet, there was a quiet resilience in these passengers. Their ability to adhere to routines, maintain social norms, and find satisfaction in small pleasures reflected a human capacity for endurance and adaptation. Even in the face of the vast, unknowable Atlantic, life continued with a calm persistence. The question remained, when the unexpected struck, would this quiet order and resilience be enough to preserve life and dignity, or would it dissolve under the shock of catastrophe? The ocean continued its steady rhythm, indifferent to the plans, routines, and expectations of those aboard. Passengers wrote letters, read quietly, walked in measured laps along the deck, and conversed in hushed tones. Each small action reinforced the delicate balance of life at sea, yet beneath it all lingered the unspoken question: how long could this calm, ordered world survive the sudden intrusion of chaos? The quiet routines of Titanic's second-class passengers, their orderly walks along the promenade deck, measured conversations in the dining saloon, and meticulous attention to personal schedules, persisted for most of the voyage. Yet, on the night of April 14, 1912, at 11:40 p.m., that calm was shattered. The ship struck an iceberg, a seemingly minor collision at first, a dull, grinding impact along the starboard hull. The noise, though sudden, was muted in the luxurious compartments of first-class passengers and largely imperceptible to those sleeping in lower decks. In second class, the effect was more immediate. Vibrations ran through the corridors, doors rattled, and the hum of the engines felt oddly irregular. At first, many passengers were unaware of the severity of the situation. Life in second class, built on routine and calm observation, meant that small disturbances were often noted but not overreacted to. Cabin stewards knocked gently on doors, seeking to reassure occupants. Crew members, themselves untrained for such unprecedented emergencies, moved with both purpose and uncertainty, guiding passengers to gather belongings and don life jackets. Yet confusion persisted. There was no immediate clarity about the threat, and the orderly world of meals, walks, and letters abruptly collided with uncertainty. Second-class cabins, usually spaces of comfort and privacy, became cramped centers of anxiety. Families hurried to collect children, coats, and essential belongings. Solo travelers, who had relied on quiet observation and personal routines, were forced into interaction, seeking guidance and assistance from both crew and fellow passengers. The contrast between the calm life of the past days and the sudden urgency of the moment was jarring. Those who had spent hours on the promenade deck, accustomed to the steady rhythm of the waves, now faced the unknown with only the dim lights of the Titanic's interior to illuminate their path. One of the most critical aspects of the second-class experience during the disaster was the reliance on the crew for direction. Unlike first-class passengers, who were nearer to officers and emergency briefings, second-class travelers depended on instructions filtered through corridors and staircases. Confusion arose when some crew members, prioritizing first-class evacuation, delayed or miscommunicated guidance to second-class areas. Doors separating classes, intended to maintain order and comfort during the voyage, now impeded movement, creating bottlenecks as passengers struggled to reach lifeboats. This unanticipated obstacle highlighted the vulnerabilities inherent in their social positioning, a reminder that routine, privilege, and access were profoundly intertwined in matters of life and death. Amidst the uncertainty, there were remarkable examples of composure and ingenuity among second-class passengers. Some families organized calmly, ensuring that children wore life jackets and that all essential items were carried. Passengers reassured one another, drawing on habits of patience and observation that had defined their voyage. Men helped women and children navigate the narrow corridors, while others stood guard at staircases to prevent panic from overwhelming the slower-moving passengers. The same structured, orderly mindset that had characterized second-class life now provided a framework for responding to chaos. Despite these efforts, the reality of the situation quickly became undeniable. Lifeboats were limited, and the process of boarding them was fraught with difficulty. Con-class passengers, positioned between first-class privilege and third-class confinement, found themselves negotiating access under the intense pressure of uncertainty. Some were fortunate to find seats on lifeboats quickly. Others waited in line for precious minutes that could mean the difference between survival and tragedy. The social hierarchy that had defined so much of their voyage now dictated not luxury, but the stark logistics of escape. The cold North Atlantic water, creeping into the ship through compartments damaged by the iceberg, created a creeping, almost imperceptible terror. For many second-class passengers, the situation was surreal. They were neither fully insulated from danger, as some first-class occupants hoped to be, nor completely exposed, as third-class travelers often were in the lower decks. Instead, they experienced the disaster in a middle space, seeing the urgency, feeling the chill of the night, hearing cries from both above and below, and constantly reassessing their own options. Their prior reliance on routine provided both calm and a troubling sense of inadequacy, as nothing in their days of reading, walking, or dining could prepare them for the mechanical and environmental chaos unfolding around them. Stories from survivors illuminate the blend of resilience, resourcefulness, and quiet heroism that characterize second-class passengers. One passenger, a schoolteacher, used the calm patience honed from years of teaching to guide a group of children to safety, explaining procedures and maintaining morale. A small group of men assisted in lowering a lifeboat, helping passengers step carefully onto the unstable boards while balancing supplies and personal belongings. Letters later recovered described not panic, but a focus on orderly action, the meticulous folding of coats, the careful fastening of life jackets, the encouragement of fellow travelers to remain composed. In these small acts, the ordinary routines of Titanic's second-class life found their most profound application. The survival of many second-class passengers contrasted sharply with the tragic losses elsewhere. Approximately 164 of 284 second-class passengers survived, a survival rate much higher than that of third class, but lower than first class. The reason was a complex combination of access, preparation, and chance. The structured routines that had defined their voyage offered some advantage: familiarity with corridors, knowledge of lifeboat locations, and a practiced calm under minor stress. Yet, the unpredictability of social bottlenecks, timing in the cold waters, meant that not all could be saved, regardless of composure or preparation. After the sinking, the survivors in second class found themselves in lifeboats, gazing back at the Titanic as it disappeared beneath the waves. The orderly, quiet life they had known on the ship was gone, replaced by the elemental reality of survival: cold, darkness, and the vast Atlantic stretching in every direction. Even in the relief of survival, many reflected on the fragility of the routines that had once defined their days. Meals, promenades, card games, all the minor comforts and small joys now seemed distant and ephemeral, yet strangely precious, as markers of human resilience in the face of an uncaring natural world. In the broader sweep of history, the experience of Titanic's second-class passengers reveals a subtle but profound lesson. While first-class luxury and third-class deprivation dominate public memory, it was the middle ground, the quiet, measured, routine-driven world of second class that demonstrates how ordinary people navigate extraordinary circumstances. The skills honed in daily life, the calm attention to detail, the patience cultivated through structured activity. Thank you, and the social bonds quietly maintained, all became vital in moments of crisis. This is a reflection not just on a single maritime disaster, but on the persistent human capacity to adapt, organize, and survive under pressure. Even a century later, the story of second-class life aboard the Titanic prompts reflection. What do we learn from the passengers whose days were measured by routine, whose lives were neither extraordinary nor destitute, yet who faced one of history's most dramatic interruptions with composure and resilience? How do ordinary routines prepare or fail to prepare us for the unexpected? The quiet order of daily life, once taken for granted, becomes a lens through which we can understand both vulnerability and strength. Titanic's second-class passengers remind us that history is not only shaped by monumental figures or grand events, but also by the measured steps, small choices, and disciplined habits of ordinary people. In the calm, repetitive details of their days, walking on the deck, reading in the lounge, conversing at meals, there existed a preparedness and endurance that, when tested, revealed the human spirit in its most understated form. And as the waves continue to lap against the Atlantic's hidden depths, carrying remnants of the ship that once bridged worlds, the story of these passengers lingers, not as a tale of tragedy alone, but as a meditation on the resilience found in routine, the dignity of ordinary life, and the fragile balance between calm order and the unpredictable forces that shape human destiny. Imagine a small English village in the 14th century, somewhere nestled between rolling hills and dense woodlands. Life here is slow by modern standards, measured in seasons, sunlight, and the repetitive rhythms of labor. At the heart of this village is the forge, a small but essential building constructed from timber and stone, its roof blackened with years of smoke. The forge is warm, even in winter, due to the constant fires that provide both heat and the intense glow needed to shape iron. The blacksmith's life revolves around this building, the glowing embers, and the rhythm of hammer against metal. A blacksmith in this period is a man, or sometimes a family, whose skill defines the practical boundaries of the village: horseshoes, nails, plows, cooking pots, and tools of every kind pass through the forge, each demanding attention, precision, and knowledge. The work begins early, often with the rising sun, though the fire must be maintained around the clock. Charcoal is shoveled into the hearth, bellows are pumped to increase the heat, and the sound of hammering begins, echoing through the streets, announcing the presence of industry to the villagers. The blacksmith's tools are simple, yet indispensable. A sturdy anvil, a variety of hammers, tongs, chisels, and files. Each tool has a specific purpose, and mastery comes from years of use. The anvil, a solid block of iron, is the silent partner in every creation, absorbing the blows of the hammer and shaping the metal into functional forms. Tongs allow the smith to maneuver glowing iron safely, while chisels and files refine and sharpen edges. The sound of each strike is not chaotic. It is deliberate, metronomic, a rhythm that matches the pulses of both fire and forge. Daily life for the blacksmith is a combination of labor, anticipation, and subtle social engagement. Villagers arrive with requests. A farmer needs plowshares repaired. A carpenter requires nails for construction. A housewife seeks hooks for her hearth. Each task carries its own urgency and precision. There is no distinction between menial and prestigious work. All serve the village, all demand skill. The blacksmith must constantly balance multiple tasks, tending the fire, shaping iron, and assisting patrons. This creates a day that feels both endless and tightly organized, a rhythm governed by need, season, and the properties of the metal itself. The forge is more than a place of labor. It is a social hub. Villagers pause outside to converse while observing the smith at work. Even in silence, the smith communicates through the sound of hammering and the visual cues of sparks and smoke. Apprentices, often young boys from the village, work under careful supervision, learning the trade through observation, repetition, and occasional correction. Their day is filled with small, methodical tasks, tending the fire, fetching tools, observing techniques, and practicing on scraps of iron. Mistakes are inevitable and instructive, teaching the apprentice patience, precision, and respect for the craft. The blacksmith's day is also dictated by the seasons. In spring and summer, the demand for agricultural tools increases as villagers prepare fields for planting. Iron-tipped plowshares must be sharpened, hoes reinforced, and scythes carefully shaped to ensure a full harvest. Autumn brings a focus on repairs, fixing wagons, reinforcing farm gates, and maintaining cooking implements for the coming winter. Winter, while less demanding in terms of agricultural labor, presents its own challenges. Firewood must be cut and stored, iron implements require care to prevent rust, and repairs of household and communal tools continue, often in the dim, cold light of short days. A closer look at the forge itself reveals the physical demands of the work, standing for hours beside the roaring fire, swinging a hammer with precision and strength, and repeatedly moving heavy iron and tools is exhausting. The air is thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning charcoal. Sparks fly unpredictably, creating small hazards that the smith must constantly anticipate. Clothing is heavy and protective, often made from leather aprons and gloves to shield against heat and accidental contact with molten metal. Despite these precautions, minor burns and abrasions are commonplace, accepted as part of the occupation's inherent risks. The blacksmith's personal life is inseparable from his labor. Many live adjacent to the forge, often in a small attached dwelling. Meals are simple, designed to sustain energy for physically demanding work. Bread, cheese, stews, and occasional meat when affordable. Water and ale are standard drinks, with ale often safer than local water sources. Meals are taken quickly, sometimes beside the fire, sometimes at a small wooden table in the home, often with apprentices or family members present. Conversations tend to revolve around work, weather, or news from neighboring villages, the ordinary fabric of a medieval life largely defined by routine and necessity. Economic pressures shape the blacksmith's world as well. Payment is often in coins, sometimes in barter, a bushel of grain, a chicken, or a service rendered in exchange for metalwork. Pricing is a delicate balance, reflecting the cost of materials, time, skill, and the village's willingness to pay. The smith must be both craftsman and businessman, negotiating fairness while maintaining the reputation that ensures steady patronage. Reputation is critical. A poorly made plowshare or a weak horseshoe can have disastrous consequences, not just for the villager, but for the smith's standing and livelihood. Children and apprentices play a vital role in the daily operations. Boys as young as 8 or 10 begin by sweeping the floors, tending the forge, and observing. Over years, they learn to handle simple tools, manipulate heated iron safely, and eventually take on more skilled work under supervision. The apprenticeship is rigorous, extending sometimes to a decade. Yet, IT is also a form of social stability. Learning the trade ensures continued employment and provides a predictable social position within the village hierarchy. This quiet, repetitive education mirrors the rhythm of the forge itself, building skill incrementally, day by day, hammer strike by hammer strike. The forge also reflects broader societal structures. While the blacksmith is essential to the village, his work is constrained by local politics, obligations to landowners or guilds if the village is near a larger town, and seasonal cycles. Authority is exercised subtly. A landlord may require repairs to communal tools, or a local lord may expect preferential service. The blacksmith must navigate these relationships carefully, maintaining independence while adhering to social norms and obligations. Even leisure is shaped by the rhythms of labor. Festivals, religious holidays, and market days break the monotony, offering respite from the forge. Yet even these are closely tied to work. Tools are needed for preparation, repairs must be made in advance, and the smith is often called upon to produce temporary implements or decorations. Life in the village does not pause entirely, and the blacksmith's role, central to daily function, remains intertwined with both celebration and necessity. Yet amid these routines, the work also carries moments of creativity and pride. Fashioning a well-balanced plowshare, a finely fitted horseshoe, or a durable cooking pot brings satisfaction that transcends mere survival. Sparks from the forge illuminate faces with a sense of accomplishment, apprentices watch in admiration, and villagers appreciate not only the utility, but the skill of the finished product. These quiet moments of achievement, often unnoticed by history, form the core of the blacksmith's experience, a testament to human endurance, patience, and the dignity of labor. By the end of the day, the forge quiets as the fire dims and the villagers return to their homes. The smith, weary from hours of hammering, careful observation and negotiation, reflects on both the work completed and the tasks awaiting the next sunrise. Life is repetitive, constrained by necessity and shaped by modest ambition, yet within this framework exists a profound resilience. The blacksmith's existence is a delicate balance between fire and iron, between skill and error, between labor and social expectation. It is a life of measured routine, unremarkable to outsiders, yet foundational to the survival and continuity of the village. And as night falls and the forge grows dark, one question lingers: how does such a life defined by repetition, craft, and quiet observation shape not only the individuals who inhabit it, but the village, and by extension, history itself? As the days and months pass in a small English village, the rhythm of the blacksmith's life becomes increasingly intertwined with the lives of others. The forge, while central, is not an isolated space. It is a hub where the practical necessities of village existence converge. Here, labor, social observation, and survival intersect, each shaping the blacksmith's daily decisions and routines. Understanding the nuances of these relationships illuminates not only the forge itself, but the subtle ways in which ordinary lives influence the fabric of medieval society. One of the defining aspects of village life is its communal nature. The blacksmith interacts with nearly every resident, either directly or indirectly, through the products of his labor. Farmers rely on him for plowshares, horseshoes, and repairs to carts and wagons. Householders come for cooking implements, nails, and ironwork for doors and locks. Shepherds, too, bring tools or small repairs. Each interaction, while often transactional, carries social weight. The blacksmith is expected to provide reliable work, demonstrate fairness in trade, and adhere to the village's social norms. Failure in any of these areas could disrupt not just the individual's livelihood, but also their standing within the community. The seasons dictate much of the forge's activity, shaping both work and social interaction. In spring, the forge hums with preparations for planting. Plows are sharpened, hoes and sickles repaired, and wheels reinforced before the long days in the fields. Summer brings maintenance for harvesting equipment, often in the sweltering heat of the forge, as laborers repair what they can during brief pauses between agricultural demands. Autumn emphasizes repair work and preparation for winter. Gates must be reinforced, hinges tightened, and household tools restored after months of wear. Even winter, though less physically demanding in terms of agricultural tools, challenges the blacksmith with frozen waterways, limited daylight, and increased repair work for items broken during harsh weather. The rhythm of labor is inescapably tied to the earth, the weather, and the seasonal needs of the village. Apprenticeship forms another vital layer of daily life, reflecting both education and social structure. Boys as young as 8 begin under the tutelage of the master blacksmith, learning not only the physical craft, but also the discipline, patience, and social propriety required in the role. The learning process is painstakingly incremental, observing the handling of molten iron, tending the fire, practicing hammer strikes on scraps, and eventually assisting with real tasks under careful supervision. Mistakes are frequent and sometimes painful, yet they are essential to mastering the craft. The apprenticeship is a slow, deliberate molding of skill and character, one that mirrors the repetitive, disciplined natu of the forge itself. The forge also functions as a subtle social barometer. By observing villagers' needs, complaints, and requests, the blacksmith gains insight into local tensions and priorities. A plowshare brought in late or poorly made might indicate stress or neglect on the farm. A wagon repaired meticulously could signal a household's rising wealth or ambition. These observations, while seemingly mundane, inform the blacksmith's interactions, negotiations, and even personal strategies for maintaining standing and influence within the village. In this way, the forge is not only a workspace, but also a lens into the complex social dynamics that shape medieval rural life. Physical labor dominates much of the day, yet it is punctuated by moments of subtle creativity. Crafting a horseshoe that fits perfectly, a lock that functions without flaw, or a plowshare hardened to withstand the toughest soil, requires attention to both technique and intuition. The blacksmith's eye and hand must remain precise, balancing strength with delicacy, while survival depends on utility. The occasional flourish, a finely finished edge or neatly curved hook, demonstrates a mastery that borders on artistry, elevating daily labor into a subtle form of human expression. Economic survival, ever present, imposes its own pressures. Payment is rarely standardized. Coins are scarce, and barter is common. Grain, chickens, eggs, or other produce are often accepted in lieu of money. Pricing requires diplomacy and local knowledge, as excessive charges could provoke resentment, while undervaluing work risks undermining livelihood. Negotiating these transactions demands a blend of pragmatism, social awareness, and patience. For the blacksmith, each deal is both practical and symbolic, a reflection of trust, competence, and community standing. Gender and family roles also influence the blacksmith's daily world. Wives, daughters, or sons often contribute to the running of the household, preparation of meals, or even minor tasks in the forge. Women might clean tools, prepare materials, or manage inventory of iron and charcoal. Children observe and learn indirectly before formal apprenticeship begins, absorbing knowledge of craft and social norms simultaneously. Life is thus a continuous integration of work, family, and community, each informing the other in a seamless but labor-intensive pattern. The forge is also shaped by technology and its limitations. Charcoal must be sourced from local woodlands, shaped and stored carefully. Iron arrives in ingots that must be heated and hammered repeatedly. Bellows require constant pumping to maintain temperature, and the blacksmith must anticipate changes in fire intensity. Small miscalculations, a fire too weak, metal overheated, can ruin hours of work. Thus, the forge is a microcosm of careful planning, observation, and adaptation, a space where skill and foresight determine success or failure. Daily life at the forge includes subtle encounters with health and hazard. The heat of the fire is relentless, and exposure can be physically exhausting. Sparks and slag pose small but constant threats of burns. Repetitive motion causes strain on hands, arms, and back. Smoke inhalation is unavoidable, contributing to long-term health effects often accepted as part of the job. These hazards, though ordinary and expected, shape the blacksmith's endurance, patience, and attention to small but crucial details, qualities that define both survival and success in this profession. Social cohesion, particularly during moments of tension, becomes apparent in seasonal challenges. A poor harvest may increase the urgency of repairing plows, wagons, and other agricultural implements. Villagers under stress might arrive impatient, frustrated, or demanding. The blacksmith must manage not only materials and tools, but also temper, negotiation, and social expectations. Every interaction requires assessment. How urgent is the task? How flexible is the client? What is the social cost of delay or error? The forge, seemingly a physical space, thus functions also as a social and psychological arena, testing the blacksmith's ability to navigate multiple pressures simultaneously. Evenings, after the work is done, offer a quieter reflection. The blacksmith and apprentices clean tools, tend to the hearth, and sometimes engage in conversation about past work, future projects, or village news. The repetition of labor, the sensory familiarity of fire and metal, and the quiet satisfaction of completed tasks provide a form of meditative routine. Journals or personal reflections, though rare in a medieval village, sometimes capture these observations. The pride in a job well done, the anticipation of seasonal demands, and the enduring awareness that the forge's work is central to village survival. Yet, for all its order and structure, life at the forge is also punctuated by unpredictability. Accidents happen, a misstrike of the hammer, a piece of metal cracking, or a fire that needs urgent attention. Social disruptions, illness, or disputes within the village require attention and adjustment. The blacksmith must navigate both the physical unpredictability of materials and the social unpredictability of human behavior. The quiet repetition of daily life, so central to medieval existence, is continually tested by circumstances that demand vigilance, adaptability, and resilience. Through these routines, the blacksmith becomes more than a laborer. He's a cornerstone of village life. Each task performed with care, each apprentice trained with patience, and each interaction conducted with respect strengthens the social fabric. Lif. E in the forge, though often overlooked in broader historical narratives, reflects the quiet endurance, skill, and moral responsibility that underpinned ordinary medieval communities. As the forge cools for the night and the village settles into darkness, the blacksmith contemplates the day and anticipates the next. Each sunrise will bring more tasks, more interactions, and more challenges. Yet, within this cycle lies the subtle beauty of life defined by labor, routine, and social connection. A beauty often invisible to those outside the village. And still, one question remains in the quiet twilight. How does this repetitive, ordinary existence shape not only the blacksmith himself, but the generations who learn, observe, and live alongside him? The life of a medieval blacksmith, measured in hours of hammering, tending the fire, and observing the subtle behavior of metal, reaches its most profound significance when viewed across seasons and years. Summer's harvest work, autumn's preparation for winter, and winter's constrained labor create a cyclical rhythm, each repetition reinforcing skill, endurance, and social responsibility. By the end of each year, the blacksmith's forge has not only produced tangible implements, but has also cemented his place within the village's hierarchy, a quiet but essential node in a network of survival, commerce, and communal life. By late autumn, the forge is often at its busiest, balancing repair work, tool creation, and preparation for harsher months ahead. Farmers bring in worn plowshares, wagons that creak and splintered handles in need of replacement. Households request nails, hinges, or iron utensils, and shepherds bring in hooks, chains, and gates. The blacksmith moves rhythmically from one task to the next, maintaining both the fire and the flow of work. Despite the apparent monotony, each action carries consequence, a misjudged. Hammer strike can ruin a tool. A poorly tempered blade may snap under strain. and delayed repairs may impact an entire household's survival. The stakes are quiet, constant, and deeply human. Apprentices, now more adept, take on increasingly complex responsibilities. They measure, shape, and even partially complete items under the watchful eye of their master. In this way, the blacksmith's knowledge, patience, and discipline are transmitted across generations. Apprentices learn not only techniques of metalworking, but also social skills, reliability, and the ability to navigate the small but intricate web of village obligations. The forge thus functions as both a workshop and a classroom, a site where practical skill and moral education are inseparable. Socially, the blacksmith occupies a unique position. His labor touches nearly every aspect of village life, granting him a subtle authority that is rarely recognized in historical records. Decisions about priorities, allocation of resources, and negotiation with clients position the blacksmith as a mediator, a problem solver, and a figure of trust. Villagers rely not merely on his skill with metal, but also on his judgment and reliability. In times of scarcity or dispute, the blacksmith often becomes a stabilizing presence, subtly influencing the rhythm and function of daily life beyond the forge itself. The seasonal pressures of life continue to test endurance. Winter brings short days and limited natural light, requiring lamps or fire to continue work. Cold air seeps into the forge, intensifying the physical strain of labor. Charcoal, harvested months earlier, must be carefully rationed. Materials like iron may be difficult to procure due to weather-impacted transport or increased demand. Amid these logistical challenges, the blacksmith maintains the same routines developed over years, tending the fire, measuring, and shaping iron, instructing apprentices, and interacting with villagers. The repetition itself becomes a strategy for survival, creating resilience through predictable labor in an unpredictable environment. Health, though often overlooked in the historical record, is both fragile and carefully managed. Repetitive labor causes strain, burns, and cuts. Exposure to smoke and heat is constant. Accidents are common. Yet through careful technique, experience, and adherence to established routines, the blacksmith and apprentices mitigate risk. The human body becomes attuned to the forge, the swing of the hammer, the tension of tongs, the timing of fire management. All are learned through practice and repetition. This bodily knowledge is a quiet testament to adaptation and endurance, a type of expertise invisible to outsiders but essential to village life. Beyond physical and social demands, the blacksmith's work is infused with subtle moments of creativity and pride. A perfectly shaped plowshare, a finely tempered blade, or a carefully balanced horseshoe demonstrates skill that transcends necessity. Such work earns recognition from villagers, reinforcing reputation and, over time, contributing to the identity of the smith himself. These minor achievements, repeated day after day, form a quiet legacy, a record not of wealth or fame but of competence, reliability, and care. This legacy extends through apprentices and family. Young apprentices, trained in patience, precision, and social responsibility, carry the blacksmith's knowledge into future decades. Sons and daughters who assist indirectly gain awareness of labor, timing, and human interaction. Each task performed, each mistake corrected, and each tool completed is a thread in a wider tapestry of communal knowledge. The blacksmith's influence, though subtle, ensures continuity of skill, social stability, and practical WI. In the context of broader history, the medieval blacksmith exemplifies the invisible infrastructure of human society. Cities and towns, trade routes, and large-scale historical events often dominate narratives, but it is the consistent, repetitive work of ordinary laborers that sustains communities. Tools forged, plows repaired, and horseshoes fitted shape agriculture, trade, and mobility. Through the quiet diligence of one individual or a small workshop, life in the village remains functional, adaptable, and resilient against the unpredictable challenges of weather, illness, or political disruption. Yet, even with this apparent stability, the blacksmith's life is precarious. Material scarcity, economic fluctuations, illness, and accidents constantly threaten the continuity of work. Each year brings uncertainty, despite the seemingly repetitive nature of labor. Life is at once routine and fragile. Success requires skill, endurance, and social intelligence. But the smallest disruption, a failed batch of iron, a flood, or a village epidemic, can ripple through daily life with consequences far beyond the forge. This delicate balance underscores the resilience and adaptability inherent in ordinary lives. At the end of each day, as the fire cools and the village settles into silence, the blacksmith reflects on both his work and his place within the broader community. There is satisfaction in completed tasks, in apprentices trained, and in the quiet trust of villagers. Yet, there is also an enduring awareness of the fragility of it all, the dependence on materials, weather, and human effort, the constant interplay of success and failure, the subtle pressures of social and economic expectations. The life of the blacksmith, unremarkable on its surface, is in fact a continuous negotiation between labor, endurance, and survival. And as night deepens over the village, the forge dark and cold, one cannot help but wonder how many lives, unrecorded and unnoticed by historians, depended on the quiet resilience of such ordinary labor. How many villages functioned, how many seasons passed, and how many futures were shaped because of the steady rhythm of hammers, fires, and skilled hands in small workshops like this one. The blacksmith's life, repetitive, physically demanding, and socially entangled, serves as a reminder that history is built not only by the extraordinary, but by the measured, patient efforts of ordinary people, day after day, year after year. Imagine stepping onto a transatlantic steamship in the mid-19th century, the kind of vessel that ferried thousands of passengers between Europe and America before the era of luxury liners. The ship is not massive by modern standards, yet it is a marvel of engineering for its time. A combination of iron hulls, wooden decks, steam engines, and sails that together promise speed, reliability, and a journey across the vast, unpredictable Atlantic. The atmosphere is dominated by the low, constant hum of machinery, the smell of coal smoke, salt, and wet wood, and the steady rhythm of life organized around the ship's schedule and the demands of the ocean. Life aboard such a ship is defined by compartmentalization. Passengers are divided into classes, first, second, and steerage, each with distinct accommodations, routines, and levels of comfort. First-class passengers enjoy private cabins, elegant meals, and opportunities for socializing and leisure. Steerage passengers, often emigrants, live in crowded dormitory-style spaces, their lives constrained by scarcity and limited privacy. In between these extremes is second class, a middle ground offering modest comfort and some freedom of movement, but still shaped by the strict routines of life at sea. Acro. SS all classes, however, the ship functions as a small, self-contained society, with hierarchies, responsibilities, and a daily rhythm that passengers must learn to navigate quickly. The day begins with the rising sun, though the exact schedule is dictated as much by light and weather as by any formal timetable. Crew members, including engineers, stokers, and deckhands, awaken early to tend the engines, inspect machinery, and ensure the ship is safe and on course. The incessant pounding of boilers and the hiss of steam set a background rhythm for life aboard. Passengers awaken to this mechanical symphony, sometimes startled by the vibrations running through the decks, the clatter of metal on metal, and the occasional call of a ship officer giving instructions. Even in the relative calm of a morning routine, the ship is alive with activity. A constant reminder that the Atlantic demands attention, vigilance, and respect. Meals form a central organizing principle of daily life. Breakfast is typically taken in the communal dining saloon, an area designed to maximize efficiency rather than elegance. Passengers gather according to class, seated at long wooden tables, and meals are served with careful attention to order and timing. Breakfast may include porridge, bread, cold meats, and tea or coffee, a practical combination designed to sustain energy for the day. Lunchtime and dinner offer heartier fare, soups, roasted meats, vegetables, and occasionally fruit, preserved or imported to maintain consistency during the voyage. The ritual of dining is both social and practical, allowing for conversation, observation, and in some cases, negotiation with fellow travelers regarding shared accommodations, provisions, or even passage details. Daily life is shaped not only by the mechanical and culinary rhythms of the ship, but also by the movement of the Atlantic itself, the OCE, and exerts a subtle yet constant influence. Gentle rocking can lull passengers into quiet contemplation, while sudden swells or storms demand physical adjustment, careful balance, and mental alertness. Even the most mundane activities, walking along the deck, ascending narrow staircases, or retrieving water from taps, require an awareness of the ship's motion. Seasickness is a persistent challenge, particularly among those unused to prolonged voyages. Remedies vary from ginger and herbal teas to simple rest and observation of the horizon. Yet many passengers spend the first days learning how to adapt to a motion that is at once steady and unpredictable. The social fabric of the ship is equally regimented. Passengers often have assigned cabins or bunks, which limits personal freedom but fosters familiarity within one's class group. Interaction between classes is limited by both physical layout and social convention. Crew members maintain authority, enforcing rules, providing guidance, and ensuring safety. Passengers quickly learn to navigate this hierarchy, observing patterns of behavior, identifying routines, and establishing informal rules of conduct. Children play in designated areas, if allowed, while adults negotiate space, privacy, and communal norms. Even in moments of leisure, there is an underlying awareness of order, hierarchy, and the ship's constraints, a reminder that life at sea is always mediated by structure. The engine room, often invisible to passengers, dictates the tempo of life aboard. Stokers shovel coal into furnaces, maintaining steam pressure that drives the ship's engines, while engineers monitor gauges, adjust valves, and ensure that the massive machinery runs smoothly. Passengers sense this through vibrations underfoot, the constant hum and occasional roar of the engine, and the periodic shudder of the hull. For those accustomed to life on LA, its presence is both reassuring and intimidating. A mechanical heartbeat that promises progress yet reminds travelers of the immense energy required to traverse the Atlantic. Observation, reflection, and minor recreation occupy the spaces between meals and responsibilities. The promenade deck, open to the sea and sky, provides limited opportunities for exercise and observation. Passengers walk back and forth, noting the horizon, watching gulls, or conversing quietly. Some engage in reading, card games, or letter writing, activities designed to pass the hours without overtaxing attention or energy. The monotony of the ocean and the repetitive sound of engines create a meditative environment where small pleasures, a glimpse of dolphins, a particularly colorful sunset, or a shared joke, assume disproportionate significance in the daily narrative of the voyage. Evenings on the steamship are subdued, particularly among second-class and steerage passengers. Light is limited, often provided by oil lamps or early electrical systems where available, and social gatherings are constrained by space and propriety. Conversations focus on practical matters, upcoming ports of call, personal plans, health concerns, or observations of the crew's routines. First-class passengers may enjoy music, formal dinners, or more elaborate entertainment, yet even here the ship's constant hum, occasional vibrations, and proximity to fellow travelers limit the freedom to act entirely without regard for environment or social expectation. Life is therefore defined by compromise between personal comfort, communal norms, and the ever-present influence of the Atlantic itself. Weather, both calm and severe, exerts its subtle authority over the ship. Misty mornings obscure the horizon, leading to slower navigation and constrained observation. Strong winds or choppy seas require careful footwork on deck, strategic placement of cargo, and occasional adjustments to the engine's output or the sail's configuration. Passengers internalize these environmental cues, a change in wind direction, the darkening of clouds, or the subtle pitch of the deck prompts practical decisions about clothing, activity, or even whether to remain in cabins. Adaptation to the ocean is both a mental and physical challenge, learned gradually through observation, experience, and trial and error. Throughout the voyage, correspondence and documentation are crucial for maintaining connection to life on land. Passengers write letters to family and friends, record experiences in journals, and sometimes keep logs of practical details. weather patterns, sea conditions, or the progress of the ship. These acts of record-keeping serve dual purposes: personal reflection and practical continuity. Written words bridge the distance between the transient, contained world of the steamship and the broader social, economic, and emotional networks of home. Yet, amid these routines and reflections, there is an underlying awareness of vulnerability. The Atlantic is vast, unpredictable, and indifferent to human ambition or planning. The steady hum of the engines and the apparent order of the ship's design conceal the reality that accidents, storms, or mechanical failures could disrupt the carefully constructed microcosm at any moment. Passengers, aware of this in subtle ways, structure their days around predictability, observation, and practical prudence. Yet they are also forced to live with the constant, low-level tension of uncertainty. Life aboard a 19th-century transatlantic steamship is therefore a blend of routine observation, adaptation, and subtle social negotiation. Each day is organized around meals, mechanical rhythms, social hierarchies, and environmental cues. Passengers develop strategies to cope with monotony, motion, and minor discomfort, often finding satisfaction in small achievements, brief interactions, and the quiet pleasure of surviving the journey intact. The voyage, though ostensibly a transition between continents, becomes in itself a complex social and practical ecosystem, demanding attention, endurance, and patience. And as the ship presses steadily into the Atlantic, propelled by both steam and human labor, one question quietly persists. How will these carefully cultivated routines, social observations, and minor adaptations stand against the unexpected challenges that the vast, indifferent ocean might soon impose? As the steamship presses steadily into the Atlantic, the initial novelty of life aboard begins to settle into a predictable rhythm for passengers. The hum of engines, the constant vibration beneath the decks, and the steady roll of the vessel become the backdrop to the daily routines of a microcosmic society where social hierarchy, economic status, and adaptability dictate how each person experiences the voyage. For second-class passengers, and steerage travelers in particular, life becomes a careful negotiation between comfort, survival, and social expectation. The ship is divided physically and socially into compartments: cabins for first-class passengers, smaller and simpler accommodations for second class, and the crowded utilitarian spaces of steerage. These divisions create distinct routines. First-class travelers enjoy private meals, spacious cabins, and relative insulation from the motion and noise of the ship. Steerage passengers, often emigrants, contend with cramped quarters, minimal ventilation, and shared sanitation facilities, their lives regulated by both spatial constraints and the mechanical demands of the ship. Second-class passengers occupy a middle ground: modest cabins, limited privacy, and social expectations that require careful negotiation of space, noise, and etiquette. Each class experiences the voyage differently, yet all are bound by the ocean and the vessel's machinery. Daily routines are structured around meals, observation, and incremental tasks. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner punctuate the day, providing not only nourishment but also social organization. Passengers in each class gather at assigned tables, consuming practical meals that emphasize sustenance over luxury. Conversation is generally polite and restrained, though it occasionally reveals underlying tensions, comparisons of past journeys, speculation about opportunities in the Americas, or discreet commentary on fellow passengers' behavior. Food, while modest, serves as a vital social cue, dictating movement, seating, and the rhythm of communal interaction. The ship's environmental conditions profoundly influence daily life. Calm seas allow for leisurely walks along the promenade, quiet reading, or card games, while rough weather restricts movement, intensifies seasickness, and increases anxiety. Even minor swells require attentiveness. Passengers must adjust their footing, secure belongings, and navigate narrow staircases without incident. Crew members, particularly deckhands and officers, monitor the ship's course and engine output, adjusting operations in response to changing wind, waves, and weather. Passengers, though not directly responsible, internalize these cues, adapting routines to align with the ocean's subtle but persistent influence. Social hierarchies are reinforced both formally and informally. Crew members maintain authority through visible roles, instructions, and enforcement of rules. Passengers comply not only out of necessity, but also to preserve social order, particularly in shared spaces, such as dining halls, stairwells, and promenades. Second-class travelers, navigating between first-class privilege and steerage constraints, are acutely aware of their position. They must balance adherence to social norms with practical concerns, securing adequate provisions, negotiating space, and maintaining polite relations with both passengers and crew. These social dynamics, though subtle, govern behavior at nearly every moment of the voyage. Daily work and personal attention further structure life. Passengers are responsible for maintaining their cabins, arranging bedding, and securing belongings against movement caused by waves or engine vibration. Clothing must be laundered, repaired, or arranged with attention to limited space. Children, especially in second-class and steerage compartments, must be supervised carefully to prevent accidents or disruptions in commune. AL areas. Even leisure activities, such as reading or letter writing, require adaptation to movement and environmental limitations. Life aboard the ship is thus an exercise in continuous small-scale adaptation, where attention to detail ensures both comfort and safety. Health and hygiene are persistent concerns. Confined quarters, shared sanitation, and prolonged exposure to damp or cold air contribute to frequent illness and discomfort. Seasickness is common, and remedies vary. Ginger, ale, or simple rest are the primary solutions. Crew members and some passengers develop informal strategies to cope with motion, observing the horizon, pacing the deck, or limiting activity during periods of rough sea. The ability to endure minor discomforts becomes a measure of adaptation, and those who manage effectively often gain small social advantages, as composure and resilience are visible to both peers and crew. Recreational and social interactions, though constrained, play a subtle role in maintaining morale. Passengers gather in lounges, card rooms, or designated promenades, engaging in quiet conversation, games, or reading aloud. Observation becomes a shared activity. Passengers watch the horizon, comment on weather conditions, or note marine life. These routines, though seemingly trivial, create cohesion and predictability in a world otherwise dominated by motion, noise, and environmental uncertainty. The microcosm of the ship depends on these quiet habits to maintain order, morale, and a sense of normalcy. Emergent tensions often arise in response to the interplay of hierarchy, scarcity, and fatigue. Steerage passengers, limited by space, rations, and ventilation, sometimes experience friction with neighbors or crew. Complaints about overcrowding, noise, or unequal treatment are common and must be navigated delicately to prevent disruption. Second-class passengers, positioned between the extremes of wealth and deprivation, negotiate their privileges carefully, aware that minor deviations in behavior may provoke oversight or disapproval. These small social negotiations, repeated daily, form an invisible system of checks, balances, and unspoken agreements that sustain life aboard the vessel. The engines, ever present, continue their quiet dominance over daily experience. The pounding of pistons, the hiss of steam, and the occasional vibration of machinery serve as both comfort and reminder. Progress depends on continuous, careful operation. Crew members labor to maintain pressure, monitor temperature, and manage fuel, often in sweltering or cramped conditions. Passengers sense this labor indirectly, internalizing the machine's rhythm into the daily cadence of life. The interplay of human endurance, mechanical operation, and environmental forces creates a structured but fragile system, dependent on both attention and routine. Communication aboard the ship extends to letters, journals, and observation. Passengers record experiences, monitor distance traveled, and note weather conditions. These acts serve practical and psychological purposes. They maintain connection with the outside world, preserve memories, and offer a semblance of control over an otherwise unpredictable environment. Writing becomes a quiet anchor in the ebb and flow of life at sea. a means of asserting order and continuity amidst mechanical and natural rhythms. Yet beneath this surface of routine and adaptation lies a constant awareness of vulnerability. The Atlantic is vast and unpredictable. Storms, mechanical failures, and illness are ever-present threats. The routines, hierarchies, and minor adaptations that sustain daily life offer stability, but they cannot eliminate uncertainty. Passengers, consciously or subconsciously, live with this tension, their habit. Observations and social negotiations forming a collective strategy to endure both monotony and potential crisis. By the end of the second day at sea, passengers are intimately acquainted with the ship's rhythms, the crew's authority, and the nuances of social hierarchy. Life is predictable yet precarious, comfortable yet constrained, and dominated by the subtle pressures of environment, machinery, and society. The transatlantic steamship is a world unto itself, a floating community shaped by human adaptation, mechanical dependency, and the constant, quiet authority of the ocean. Even in this carefully managed environment, questions linger. How will passengers cope if monotony turns to emergency, if rough seas intensify, or machinery fails, or illness spreads? The routines developed in calm waters, the social hierarchies observed during leisure, and the careful attention to detail all prepare travelers to some degree. But can preparation alone guard against the unpredictable challenges of the open Atlantic? As the steamship progresses across the Atlantic, life aboard is initially dominated by routine, observation, and adaptation. But even the most carefully established rhythms are subject to disruption. Storms, mechanical issues, and minor illnesses gradually test the resilience of passengers and crew alike, revealing both the fragility and ingenuity inherent in life at sea. For ordinary travelers, second-class passengers, and those in steerage, these disruptions are particularly instructive, demonstrating the subtle strategies humans develop when confronted with uncertainty in confined, shared spaces. Storms, though not catastrophic in the majority of voyages, provide the first real challenge to the routines established over days at sea. The calm hum of engines is suddenly accompanied by the clatter of loose equipment, the groaning of timbers, and the roar of wind, and waves against the hull. Passengers quickly adapt, children are held close, furniture is secured, and meals are postponed. The crew intensifies labor, adjusting the engines, managing sails if present, and ensuring that the ship remains on course. For passengers, the storm transforms passive observation into active engagement, balancing steps on rolling decks, moving cautiously along passageways, and negotiating shared space with others whose nerves and patience are equally tested. The experience reveals both vulnerability and resilience, highlighting the importance of observation, cooperation, and adaptability. Mechanical disruptions, while less dramatic, pose persistent challenges. Steam engines require constant monitoring, and even minor fluctuations in pressure or temperature can affect propulsion. Stokers, engineers, and deckhands work tirelessly in the bowels of the ship, shoveling coal, adjusting valves, and repairing worn components. Passengers are usually aware only of indirect effects, vibrations, changes in engine noise, or temporary reductions in speed. Yet these small signs are reminders of dependence. Life aboard the vessel is sustained not only by human routine, but also by the functioning of technology, which is itself fallible and requires constant attention. In this way, the voyage illustrates a quiet interdependence between passengers, crew, and machinery. Health challenges, particularly seasickness and minor infections, underscore the human limits of adaptation. Many passengers in steerage suffer from nausea, dehydration, and fatigue, exacerbated by crowded quarters, limited ventilation, and scarcity of fresh food. Second-class travelers, though less confined, still face motion-induced discomfort and the physical strain of adapting to shipboard life. Coping strategies emerge organically: careful observation of the horizon, regulated food intake, rest during rough periods, and discreet communal support. Even these modest adaptations reveal the ingenuity and resilience of ordinary humans confronted with persistent environmental stress. Daily routines continue, but they are now punctuated by a heightened awareness of potential disruption. Mealtimes, once predictable, may be delayed or simplified. Deck walks and leisure activities are adjusted in response to weather and mechanical signals. Cabin maintenance, previously an exercise in habit, becomes a practical necessity for safety and comfort. The repetition of daily tasks, feeding, walking, cleaning, observing, is now informed by the subtle memory of risk, illustrating how routine adapts in response to both external threats and human experience. Social hierarchies and interactions are tested under these conditions. Crew authority becomes more visible, as instructions must be followed promptly to maintain order and safety. Passengers negotiate space and behavior more cautiously, aware that friction could have practical consequences. Tensions occasionally flare, particularly in steerage where space and resources are limited. Second-class passengers, negotiating between privilege and limitation, often act as intermediaries, helping to maintain calm, provide guidance, or model appropriate behavior. In these moments, the social microcosm of the ship becomes not only a measure of status, but also a survival mechanism, with cooperation and observation essential to enduring disruption. The subtle achievements of passengers emerge under duress. Navigating a rolling deck, assisting children or neighbors, or improvising remedies for minor discomfort requires observation, judgment, and patience. These small acts, though often unnoticed, form the backbone of social resilience aboard the vessel. Individual ingenuity, whether in balancing a tray of food, stabilizing personal belongings, or coordinating shared cabin space, ensures continuity in a world otherwise dominated by uncontrollable forces. The quiet, repetitive labor of everyday adaptation becomes a form of survival skill, shaping experience in ways both practical and psychological. The voyage culminates not in catastrophe for most passengers, but in a reflective understanding of interdependence, resilience, and the role of routine. Arrival in port brings relief, but also an appreciation for the subtle lessons embedded in daily life at sea. The importance of observation, the careful management of resources, and the social intelligence required to navigate hierarchical spaces under constraint. Travelers carry with them not only physical fatigue, but also the quiet awareness that life aboard the steamship is a microcosm of human experience itself, a blend of routine, unpredictability, and adaptation. Historical records from passengers' journals and letters emphasize the significance of these ordinary experiences. They recount the mundane tasks, the minor crises, and the quiet strategies that allowed individuals and communities to endure the voyage. While disasters occasionally punctuated these journeys, the majority of travel was shaped by careful observation, patient adaptation, and social negotiation. In this way, the microcosmic life aboard the steamship reflects broader historical themes: human resilience, interdependence, and the quiet efficacy of ordinary labor and awareness. Even as passengers disembark and the mechanical hum of the ship fades into memory, the voyage leaves enduring lessons. Routine and habit, seemingly mundane, are revealed as critical tools for managing uncertainty. Observation, patience, and small acts of cooperation underpin survival in ways that formal records often overlook. And the quiet endurance of ordinary individuals, the second-class travelers, the children, the laboring crew, shapes both their immediate experience and the broader understanding of human adaptation in challenging circumstances. In reflecting on the journey, one is left with a final thought: the vast Atlantic, the roaring engines, and the cramped accommodations might seem distant or unremarkable from a modern perspective, yet, for those aboard, they represented a delicate balance between control and chaos. How many small acts of observation, patience, and subtle adaptation determined the success of a voyage? How many routines, unnoticed and unrecorded, ensured that the vast machinery of human travel could function reliably in the face of an unpredictable ocean? The answers lie not in grand narratives, but in the quiet, ordinary details of life between decks, where history was lived in repetition, resilience, and measured awareness. Imagine stepping into a printing workshop in a European city around the mid-16th century. a time when the invention of the printing press was beginning to reshape knowledge, commerce, and culture. The building itself is modest. Timber beams support low ceilings and windows are small, admitting only slanted light that illuminates dust particles in the air. The scent of ink, wet paper, and oiled wood dominates the senses, mingling with the faint, lingering aroma of sawdust from wooden typecases, and the occasional tang of molten metal used to cast new letters. Every corner of the workshop is a testament to human effort, precision, and the repetitive labor that sustains this early modern technology. At the heart of the workshop stands the press itself, a wooden contraption of levers, screws, and flat surfaces designed to transfer ink from raised type to paper. Its operation requires a combination of strength, timing, and meticulous attention to detail. One worker rolls ink across the carefully arranged type, ensuring even airage without smudging or excess, while another positions the paper with precision to prevent misalignment. A third operates the press, pulling the screw to press the platen evenly against the inked type. Each stroke is repetitive but critical, forming a rhythm that governs the entire workshop. The sound of the press, a firm grinding thump, followed by a soft hiss as the platen is released, is the heartbeat of the operation, echoing across the wooden floor and walls. The workers themselves are a small, interdependent team. The master printer oversees production, inspects each printed sheet for quality, and manages the assignment of tasks. Compositors, often apprentices or journeymen, spend hours arranging individual letters into words and sentences, carefully composing pages in reverse so that the text appears correctly when printed. This work demands intense focus, a steady hand, and an understanding of spacing and alignment. Mistakes are costly. A misaligned letter or inverted type can ruin an entire sheet, wasting both paper and ink, commodities that are expensive and valued highly in this period. Paper, another essential component, is laboriously prepared and stored. Sheets are hand-cut, sized, and sometimes coated or pressed to ensure uniformity. Quality varies according to the source, and the workshop must adjust pressure, ink consistency, and timing to account for differences in thickness, texture, and absorbency. Even the slightest deviation can result in blotches, smudges, or incomplete impressions. Observing this process, one realizes that printing is as much about managing materials as it is about manipulating machinery. The human eye and hand are essential instruments in every stage of production. Ink is similarly exacting. Composed of soot, gum, and oil, it must be ground and mixed to achieve the correct consistency. Too thick, and it smears or clogs the type. Too thin, and it fails to adhere evenly to the paper. The preparation of ink is a careful ritual, often performed in the early morning when light is sufficient to judge consistency and color. Workers continuously monitor its application, adjusting roller pressure and re-inking type as necessary. Even minor lapses in attention can compromise an entire run of pages, emphasizing the importance of precision, patience, and constant observation. The rhythm of the workshop is structured by both machinery and human labor. Apprentices arrive early to perform preparatory tasks, setting type, grinding ink, cutting and stacking paper, and cleaning the press. Journeymen and master printers coordinate these efforts, monitoring both productivity and quality. The repetitive nature of each task, inking, pressing, aligning, creates a continuous cycle, a flow of labor punctuated only by brief pauses to inspect, correct, or replace materials. The environment is physically demanding, standing for hours, lifting heavy stacks of paper, and exerting force on the press require endurance, while mental focus is equally taxed by the need to avoid error. Social dynamics within the workshop are subtle but significant. Apprentices learn not only technical skills, but also etiquette, patience, and the hierarchical norms that govern the workshop. The master printer's authority is absolute in production matters, yet personal relationships influence training, task assignment, and the distribution of responsibility. Experienced workers model technique and efficiency, while novices absorb not just method, but the implicit rules of cooperation, timing, and workplace rhythm. Life in the workshop is therefore as much about social learning as mechanical expertise. a small-scale society in which status, skill, and diligence are constantly observed and evaluated. The workday is also deeply influenced by the natural environment. Light from small windows dictates what can be done safely and accurately. So many workshops operate on a schedule that begins early in the morning and ends with diminishing daylight. Winter months, with shorter days, slow production, while summer allows for longer hours. Noise, movement, and the odor of ink and paper fill the space, creating a sensory environment that is constant yet ever-changing, shaped by the rhythm of production and the demands of human labor. Orders drive the workshop's activities. Printers work on religious texts, legal documents, scholarly works, and occasional pamphlets designed for mass circulation. Deadlines vary. Some commissions demand careful attention over weeks or months, while others require rapid production to respond to political, economic, or social developments. Each type of work brings its own pressures. Scholarly works require accuracy in both text and layout. Legal documents demand precision and compliance with formal conventions, and pamphlets or ephemeral publications necessitate speed and efficiency. The combination of human skill, material limitations, and client expectations defines the tempo of the workshop in ways that are rarely visible outside its walls. Apprenticeship is central to sustaining the workshop's operation. Young workers begin with the most repetitive and menial tasks, grinding ink, cleaning type, or stacking paper, and gradually progress to compositing letters and operating the press. Learning occurs slowly, with repeated exposure, correction, and observation, often over many years. This methodical education ensures that skill is transmitted accurately, that errors are minimized, and that the integrity of the printing process is maintained. The repetition, tedium, and slow accumulation of expertise are themselves a form of survival, both for the workshop, which relies on consistent output, and for the apprentice, who must master technique, endurance, and social nuance. Despite the apparent monotony, moments of creativity and pride punctuate the day. Correctly set type, evenly pressed pages, and flawless impressions offer satisfaction to the skilled printer. The tactile sensation of aligning type, rolling ink, and pressing a sheet provides immediate feedback, a small but meaningful sense of accomplishment in an otherwise repetitive workflow. Workers develop a quiet appreciation for their craft, understanding the subtle interplay of skill, observation, and timing required to produce even a single sheet of readable text. At the end of the day, the press is cleaned, type is returned to cases, paper is stacked, and the workshop is readied for the next session. The lingering smell of ink and oil permeates clothing, hands, and hair, a physical reminder of labor performed and tasks accomplished. Workers leave the space physically tired, mentally focused, and socially aware, carrying the quiet satisfaction of contribution to a process that, though repetitive and demanding, is central to the spread of knowledge and the functioning of early modern society. Yet, even in this carefully regulated world of ink and type, one thought lingers: how did the repetitive, painstaking labor of ordinary workers, the compositors, press operators, and apprentices, shape the broader trajectory of knowledge, literacy, and culture in ways that remain invisible in the grand narratives of history? Life inside a 16th century printing workshop is shaped as much by social hierarchy and economic pressures as it is by the mechanical demands of the press. Beyond the visible tasks of arranging type, rolling ink, and pressing sheets lies a complex network of human interactions, resource management, and careful negotiation between labor, material scarcity, and client expectations. Understanding these subtler forces illuminates the full story of how knowledge and culture were disseminated in the early modern period, and how ordinary workers navigated the rigid demands of craft, authority, and survival. At the apex of the workshop hierarchy is the master printer. The master's responsibilities extend far beyond technical skill. They include oversight of production, quality control, apprenticeship management, procurement of materials, negotiation of contracts, and even compliance with guild regulations or local censorship authorities. The master's authority is absolute in matters of labor and production, yet it is continually moderated by practical concerns, ensuring the timely fulfillment of commissions, maintaining profitability, and navigating the sometimes conflicting demands of patrons, apprentices, and journeymen. Even small errors in judgment, such as miscalculating material requirements or misestimating time for a print run, could affect both financial outcomes and reputation. Beneath the master, journeymen carry significant responsibility. They possess sufficient skill to operate the press independently, compose pages accurately, and manage apprentices in specific tasks. Journeymen are both workers and mediators. They balance the instructions of the master with the capabilities and limitations of apprentices, smoothing the workflow while ensuring that quality is maintained. Their position is precarious, however. They occupy a middle ground that requires both technical expertise and social diplomacy, often performing tasks under constant scrutiny from both the master and the apprentices learning their craft. Apprentices form the base of the hierarchy, entering the workshop as young as 10 or 12. Their work is repetitive, painstaking, and often physically demanding, grinding ink, cleaning type, retrieving paper, and assisting with the press. Learning is incremental and slow. Compositors are not expected to master complex arrangements for many years. The apprenticeship serves multiple purposes. It ensures the transmission of technical skill, enforces discipline and patience, and socializes young workers into the norms of workshop life. Mistakes are expected, but they are closely monitored and corrected. Repetition is both a pedagogical strategy and a survival mechanism. Mastering small, precise movements over time ensures the efficiency and reliability of the workshop as a whole. Economic pressures loom over every aspect of workshop life. Paper and ink are expensive, often imported or handmade, and mistakes result in tangible financial loss. Clients pay according to contracts, sometimes in installments, sometimes with material compensation, such as parchment or binding services. Delays in production can damage reputation and reduce future commissions, while overproduction may waste scarce resources. The master printer must balance supply and demand, assigning tasks according to skill and capacity, and constantly monitoring the pace of work to maintain profitability. In this way, even the repetitive labor of an apprentice or journeyman is deeply entwined with the workshop's economic survival. Guild regulations, where present, further complicate the social and economic dynamics. Printing was often a tightly controlled trade, with guilds enforcing standards for quality, apprenticeship duration, and even the content of printed materials. Compliance required vigilance. Typefaces had to meet specifications, layouts adhered to established conventions, and certain texts were subject to censorship or inspection. For the workers, guild oversight introduced additional stress. Minor errors could have consequences beyond the workshop, potentially affecting the master's license and the apprentice's training opportunity. Life in the workshop was therefore not only physically and mentally demanding, but also socially and legally constrained. The spatial organization of the workshop reinforces these hierarchies. The press occupies a central position, with clear paths for workflow. Type cases, ink rollers, and paper stacks are arranged to maximize efficiency and control. Apprentices work in designated corners, often under the direct supervision of journeymen, while the master observes from a slightly removed vantage point. This spatial hierarchy mirrors the social structure, creating a system in which observation, correction, and instruction are seamlessly integrated into the physical layout of the workshop. Every movement, placement, and adjustment is both a technical and social act. Despite the rigor and discipline, the workshop contains subtle opportunities for individual agency and creativity. Experienced compositors may develop techniques to speed layout without sacrificing accuracy, or find ways to optimize ink distribution to produce more consistent impressions. Apprentices, over time, learn to anticipate the press's demands, the paper's response, and the ink's behavior, gaining a sense of mastery that feels both tactile and intellectual. Even minor successes, an evenly pressed page, a flawless letterform, or an efficiently composed sheet, provide a sense of achievement within an otherwise repetitive and tightly controlled environment. Interactions among workers are equally layered. Apprentices observe each other, learn collectively, and sometimes compete for the master's approval. Journeymen provide guidance, enforce discipline, and model acceptable behavior, often quietly negotiating social tensions that arise in the confined, high-pressure environment. Humor, quiet conversation, and small rituals, such as sharing a meal, exchanging news, or commenting on the press's quirks, eat cohesion and reduce stress, forming the invisible social glue that allows the workshop to function effectively day after day. Work cycles are intimately tied to natural and artificial light. Most workshops rely on daylight, beginning work at first light and continuing until dusk. In winter, the short days limit productivity, while summer allows for extended printing hours. Some workshops employ candles or oil lamps for limited evening work, though the flickering light and soot accumulation create additional challenges. Workers adjust their routines carefully, balancing the need for productivity against fatigue, visibility, and the risk of errors. Rhythm, repetition, and timing become central to survival, not only of the workshop's output, but of the workers themselves, whose skill, endurance, and focus are constantly tested. Material management is a continuous concern. Ink dries or clogs, paper can warp or tear, and metal type may become damaged or worn. Workers must monitor these materials carefully, making small adjustments to ensure consistent results. Even minor deviations, a slightly smudged letter, uneven pressure, or poorly aligned page, can cascade into larger errors, wasting hours of labor and valuable resources. Discipline of observation, attention to detail, and incremental correction is as important as the mechanical strength needed to operate the press itself. All these pressures, the hierarchical structure, economic constraints, guild oversight, material challenges, and physical demands, coexist with the quiet satisfaction of creating knowledge. Each sheet printed represents not only the labor of individuals, but also the coordination, endurance, and subtle expertise of a team operating within strict social and mechanical systems. Even in an age before industrial mass production, the printing workshop exemplifies the interplay of repetitive labor, social negotiation, and technical skill that underlies broader historical developments in literacy, communication, and culture. And, as the day ends, with inked type cleaned and paper stacked, the apprentices leaving their corners for brief respite, and the master reviewing the day's output, one question remains: how did the invisible, repetitive labor of these ordinary workers, hours of careful alignment, meticulous inking, and constant observation, shape the very accessibility of knowledge? And who among them ever realized the full significance of their painstaking daily contributions? As the day in the printing workshop comes to a close, the environment is quiet. Yet the echoes of labor linger in every corner. The faint scent of ink, the dust of paper fibers, and the subtle grooves worn into the wooden floors by countless footsteps. For the workers, the master, journeymen, and apprentices alike, the day represents both culmination and preparation. The immediate tasks are complete, yet every action, observation, and correction serves as groundwork for the next cycle of production. It is in this steady, almost imperceptible continuity that the significance of the printing workshop truly emerges. The master printer, surveying the day's output, is acutely aware of both the successes and the imperfections. Sheets are inspected for alignment, ink consistency, and textual accuracy. Even minor blemishes are noted and corrected before the final delivery to patrons. For the master, this process is a combination of technical oversight, economic calculation, and professional pride. The quality of each print run directly affects reputation, future commissions, and financial stability. In these quiet evaluations, the master's role blends authority with accountability, balancing human skill, mechanical operation, and material constraints. Journeymen, often working in tandem with AP, apprentices, reflect on their own performance as well. Compositors may recall errors in alignment, challenges in rolling ink evenly, or difficulties in timing the press. Each misstep is both a lesson and a caution. Skill in the workshop is cumulative, dependent on repeated practice, meticulous observation, and ongoing attention to detail. Success is measured in consistency rather than spectacle, in flawless pages rather than grand gestures. In this environment, mastery is quiet, incremental, and deeply practical. Apprentices leave their corners, physically exhausted but mentally sharpened. Their hands are stained with ink, their eyes accustomed to minute details, their movements refined through repetition. Each day is a study in endurance, discipline, and observation. While the tasks may appear mundane to outsiders, grinding ink, cleaning type, or stacking paper, they are essential to sustaining the workshop's operation. Through repetition, apprentices internalize techniques that are invisible in the final product, yet critical to its production. Their labor exemplifies the intersection of physical skill, cognitive focus, and social learning, beyond the mechanics of printing. Social relationships within the workshop continue to shape experience. Journeymen and apprentices discuss errors, exchange advice, and occasionally engage in subtle competition for the master's recognition. Humor and quiet camaraderie help mitigate fatigue and tension, creating a sense of community that sustains morale. These interactions, while minor in the grand historical record, are vital to the functioning of the workshop. Cooperation, observation, and shared knowledge ensure that production continues smoothly, even under pressure or fatigue. Economic pressures, though less visible to individual workers, persist in the background. Material costs, client expectations, and deadlines inform every decision. How much paper to prepare, how carefully to ink each page, and how to allocate labor across tasks. Each worker's efficiency directly affects the workshop's profitability. Mistakes carry tangible consequences, and careful attention to process is as much a strategy for economic survival as it is a demonstration of skill. In this way, repetitive labor is inseparable from financial and operational realities, linking the individual's actions to broader historical processes of commerce and culture. As the workshop closes for the evening, it becomes clear that the significance of this labor is both immediate and enduring. Each page produced contributes to the dissemination of knowledge, literacy, and cultural material across Europe, and eventually, the wider world. The careful, methodical work of compositors, press operators, and apprentices ensures that books, pamphlets, and documents are accurate, legible, and accessible. Without this hidden labor, the broader intellectual and cultural transformations of the 16th century, the spread of printed knowledge, the Reformation, the growth of universities and scholarly networks, would have been impossible. Even more subtly, the workshop demonstrates the power of ordinary labor to shape history. The repeated, disciplined actions of countless hands, rolling ink, aligning type, pressing sheets, create a ripple effect far beyond the walls of the building. Each completed book reaches readers, influences thought, and contributes to social, religious, or political change. Yet the individuals performing these actions often remain unrecognized, their contributions invisible in historical narratives that privilege authors, patrons, or famous works. The workshop reminds us that the infrastructure of knowledge is constructed through patient, repetitive, and often uncelebrated human effort. The tactile nature of the work, too, shapes experience. The physical engagement with type and paper, the sensory feedback of ink and press, and the rhythmic repetition of tasks cultivate a deep understanding of materials and processes. Workers develop a bodily knowledge that complements intellectual skill, the feel of a perfectly aligned letter, the pressure needed to achieve a uniform impression, the subtle adjustment of ink on the roller. This embodied expertise, invisible in the final printed page, is essential to the success of the enterprise. By the time the workshop empties, with apprentices returning home, journeymen completing their reflections, and the master overseeing the secure storage of type and ink, a quiet lesson has been imparted. History is not solely the domain of grand events, famous texts, or celebrated figures. It is equally composed of the invisible, repetitive labor of ordinary people. Hands, eyes, and minds devoted to precision, endurance, and care. Each sheet of paper, each line of type, each carefully pressed page represents convergence of technical skill, human diligence, and social coordination that quietly shapes the world beyond the workshop walls. And so, as the lamps flicker out and the streets of the city grow dark, one thought lingers: how many ideas, movements, and cultural transformations depended not on brilliant insight alone, but on the meticulous, repetitive work of countless hands in workshops like this one. How many pages of knowledge would have been lost or delayed if not for the patient labor, attention to detail, and resilience of ordinary printers and apprentices? The answer lies not in monumental narratives, but in the quiet, enduring rhythm of work that quietly built the infrastructure of history itself. Imagine standing at the entrance of a coal mine in Victorian England, sometime in the mid-19th century. The air is thick with the earthy scent of damp stone, ND coal dust. Timber supports groan faintly under the weight of the earth above, and the occasional drip of water echoes through the shafts like distant clockwork. The world outside, the streets, marketplaces and factories, is bathed in light, movement, and noise, yet here, underground, time feels different. It is measured by labor, by rhythm, and by the careful negotiation between human endurance and the ever-present constraints of the mine. For many men, boys, and even some women, entering the mine is a daily ritual that demands both mental preparation and physical fortitude. Workdays begin early, often before dawn, with a quick meal at home or in communal lodgings. Miners dress in thick, often worn clothing and heavy boots, preparing for a day of manual labor in cold, damp, and dark conditions. They carry lamps, buckets, and rudimentary tools, pickaxes, shovels, and sometimes small handcarts. The journey from surface to coalface is an initiation into another world. Narrow tunnels, uneven floors, low ceilings, and walls that seem to close in. Every step requires attention, not only to balance and footing, but to the subtle changes in air pressure, the smell of gases, and the faint vibrations that may hint at shifting stone. Inside the mine, the work is both repetitive and physically exacting. Coal must be chipped, dug, and sometimes pried from seams that are narrow, brittle, or irregular. The pickaxe becomes an extension of the miner's arm. Each stroke must be precise to avoid injury or the collapse of unstable walls. Shoveling coal into carts or onto conveyor mechanisms requires constant attention, strength, and endurance. In the darkness, where sunlight never penetrates, the body and mind rely on rhythm, muscle memory, and small, repeated tasks to maintain efficiency. Mistakes are not just inconvenient, they can be life-threatening. A misjudged swing, a loose stone, or a sudden cave-in can have catastrophic consequences, emphasizing the constant tension between labor and survival. Lighting in the mine is minimal and unreliable. Oil lamps or candles are used, casting flickering shadows on rough walls and making every movement both literal and metaphorical. An exercise in precision, focus, and careful observation. Darkness becomes a part of the work, shaping perception, strategy, and rhythm. Miners learn to read the tunnel with their hands as much as with their eyes. The texture of stone, the resonance of hammer against coal, and the faint vibrations through the floor all provide critical information. The darkness is both a challenge and a teacher, training workers in patience, attentiveness, and endurance. Social organization underground is subtle but vital. Miners often work in pairs or small teams, coordinating efforts to extract coal efficiently while minimizing risk. Communication is limited by distance, noise, and the confined environment, so signals, gestures, and brief verbal instructions are essential. Mutual awareness and trust are critical. A single lapse in attention by one worker can endanger an entire group. These dynamics create a fragile social microcosm where cooperation is not only practical, but literally a matter of life and death. Children are frequently part of the workforce, often tasked with carrying coal in small tubs, opening and closing ventilation doors, or operating simple machinery. Their work is physically demanding, their hours long, and the risks significant. Yet, in these roles, they learn essential skills: the rhythm of movement, the interpretation of environmental cues, and the importance of discipline and obedience. Apprenticeship in the mine, whether formal or informal, is both a survival strategy and a socialization process, preparing young workers for full participation in the grueling lab. Or of the coalface, health and hygiene are constant concerns. Coal dust permeates every surface: clothing, skin, hair, lungs, and contributes to long-term respiratory problems. Injuries are common, cuts, bruises, and broken bones are routine, while more severe accidents are always a looming threat. The confined, damp environment fosters infection, and the repetitive physical strain leads to chronic musculoskeletal problems. Miners develop strategies to cope with these challenges, pacing themselves, alternating tasks, and relying on social observation to avoid hazards. The body becomes both a tool and a vulnerable instrument, demanding constant care and careful management. The rhythm of life underground is shaped by cycles of labor and brief respites. Meals are often small and carried into the mine, eaten quickly at the coalface during short pauses. Water is rationed, and the environment allows little space for comfort. Conversation is minimal, punctuated by shouts or gestures to coordinate movement. The repetition of tasks, chipping, shoveling, hauling, is punctuated by moments of attention to risk, observation of the seam, and adjustment to tools. This rhythm structures the day, provides a framework for endurance, and transforms repetitive labor into a form of disciplined survival. The relationship between miner and environment is complex. The earth is both source of livelihood and constant potential danger. Coal seams vary in hardness, thickness, and stability. Tunnels must be maintained to prevent collapse, and gases, methane, carbon monoxide, pose invisible threats that require vigilance, both individual and collective. Miners develop intimate knowledge of their subterranean environment, the sound of shifting rock, the smell of vented air, the subtle variations in wall texture. Survival depends on translating these sensory cues into action, judgment, and cautious adaptation. Despite the harsh conditions, the mine functions as a community. Miners develop informal hierarchies based on experience, skill, and knowledge of the seams. The hewer, responsible for cutting coal directly from the seam, is respected for technical skill, while less experienced workers or children perform supporting tasks. This hierarchy is reinforced through daily routines, shared hardship, and collective observation. Even small gestures, handing tools, signaling danger, sharing food, reinforce trust, coordination, and social cohesion within the mine. The end of the shift brings its own rituals and challenges. Emerging from the darkness into daylight is a physical and psychological transition. Eyes must adjust, skin and lungs carry the residue of dust, and muscles recover from hours of strain. Evening routines involve washing, repairing tools, and preparing for the next day. Despite fatigue, there is often conversation, storytelling, and brief leisure. A recognition that human connection sustains endurance as much as physical strength. Yet, as miners return home, questions remain. How do daily exposure to darkness, repetitive labor, and constant risk shape perception, social bonds, and the very sense of time? How does a life measured in swings of a pickaxe, shifts of coal, and careful navigation of danger influence identity, resilience, and understanding of the world outside the mine? These questions linger, unspoken but omnipresent, as the cycle of work and survival continues. Day life in a Victorian coal mine is far more than the mechanical rhythm of pickaxes and shovels. It is a complex interplay of social hierarchy, economic necessity, and collective adaptation to a hostile environment. Miners, often confined underground for long hours, form networks of trust, mutual observation, and cooperation that are crucial to both efficiency and survival. Each day is a delicate balance between personal endurance, skillful labor, and navigating the intricate social web of the mine. At the center of this web is the hewer, the skilled worker responsible for cutting coal directly from the seam. Hewers are both respected and envied for their technical expertise and productivity. Their skill lies not just in swinging a pickaxe, but in reading the seam, estimating hardness, stability, and thickness, anticipating hazards, and knowing where to direct their labor most effectively. The hewer's knowledge is often tacit, acquired through years of apprenticeship and observation, and is essential to the productivity and safety of the entire team. Less experienced miners and children perform supporting tasks, transporting coal, clearing debris, or managing ventilation doors. But their work is tightly coordinated with the hewer's actions, creating a system in which efficiency depends on interdependence. Apprentices and young boys in the mine occupy a delicate position within this hierarchy. Their labor is essential but physically taxing and socially constrained. Children may operate ventilation doors, transport small tubs of coal, or perform errands for older workers. These tasks, while seemingly menial, are crucial to maintaining workflow and safety. Young miners quickly learn the unspoken rules of the mine: when to speak, how to move quietly, and how to observe signs of danger without causing alarm. Apprenticeship underground is both education and survival training, instilling discipline, observational skill, and respect for hierarchy. Economic pressures permeate every aspect of life in the mine. Miners are often paid by the amount of coal extracted, measured in tons or tubs, linking physical labor directly to livelihood. This system incentivizes productivity, but also amplifies risk. Cutting too quickly, ignoring small hazards, or neglecting rest can increase output but jeopardize safety. Families depend on the income of miners, and for many children, labor underground is a financial necessity. These pressures create subtle tensions between survival, productivity, and caution, requiring constant judgment and adaptation. Health and safety, though imperfectly regulated, are central concerns. Accidents are frequent, ranging from minor injuries, bruises, cuts, and sprains, to catastrophic cave-ins or flooding. The presence of methane and other gases introduces invisible hazards, demanding vigilance and knowledge of ventilation patterns. Miners develop informal strategies to detect danger, listening to the sound of shifting rock, observing subtle changes in airflow, and monitoring fellow workers' movements. Knowledge becomes both a tool for survival and a measure of status within the mine. Those who anticipate hazards and respond appropriately are valued, while errors can have immediate and deadly consequences. The social structure underground also depends on cooperation and observation. Miners rely on one another for signaling, problem-solving, and mutual support. In a narrow seam, a single misstep can block passage, crush a limb, or trigger a collapse. Trust is paramount. Communication is often minimal, conveyed through gestures or brief shouts, yet every movement and decision is observed carefully by others. Experienced workers guide newcomers, offering instruction in safety, efficiency, and rhythm. These relationships are a form of invisible infrastructure, as essential to survival as the timber sup, orts holding the mine walls. The rhythm of labor underground is cyclical and methodical. Workdays begin before sunrise and often extend 12 hours or more, punctuated by short breaks for meals or rest. Miners alternate between intense physical exertion at the coalface and slower tasks such as hauling, sorting, or shoring up walls. Even in periods of relative calm, attention must remain constant. The mine offers no reprieve from vigilance. Repetition, rhythm, and endurance shape not only physical performance, but also cognitive strategies. Miners develop mental maps of the tunnels, anticipate the demands of each seam, and internalize the sequence of tasks necessary for efficiency and safety. Social cohesion is reinforced by both hierarchy and informal norms. Experienced miners mentor younger colleagues, while established customs dictate movement, signaling, and task allocation. Humor, storytelling, and quiet conversation occur in brief moments of respite, offering relief from physical and psychological strain. These social practices, subtle and often overlooked in historical accounts, maintain morale, reduce fatigue, and cultivate a shared sense of responsibility. The mine functions not merely as a site of extraction, but as a tightly regulated social environment where order, observation, and cooperation are essential to continued operation. Family networks extend the mine's social structure beyond the underground tunnels. Women and older children may manage household responsibilities, care for younger siblings, and assist in ancillary tasks such as cleaning, laundry, or managing food supplies for working miners. The economic output of the miner supports a wider system of survival, linking labor underground to domestic management above ground. These networks reinforce the pressures, expectations, and rhythms of mining life, creating a feedback loop in which survivor L is negotiated collectively, both within and outside the mine. Even in the most routine aspects of work, vigilance and adaptation are central. Minor environmental changes, such as the smell of dampness, a faint shift in the walls, or the feel of the coal seam, signal potential hazards. Workers continuously adjust posture, strike, and movement in response to these cues, integrating observation into physical practice. Success is rarely dramatic. It is measured in consistency, endurance, and the absence of accident. The mastery of routine in this context becomes an essential form of survival, shaping both individual skill and the collective efficacy of the team. By mid-afternoon, fatigue accumulates, limbs ache, lungs burn from dust, and mental focus is taxed by continuous vigilance. Yet the rhythm of labor persists. Coal must be extracted, carts moved, and tunnels maintained. Breaks are brief, meals are quick, and the physical and social coordination of tasks remains constant. Through this repetitive and strenuous work, miners develop a combination of physical endurance, environmental awareness, and social intelligence that is rarely acknowledged in historical narratives, but is critical to both personal and communal survival. As the shift draws to a close and miners emerge into the daylight, the transition is striking. The brightness, fresh air, and freedom of open space contrast sharply with the enclosed, shadowed environment of the mine. Yet even above ground, the work of observation, endurance, and coordination continues, transporting coal, tending tools, preparing for the next shift, and managing the household responsibilities linked to their labor. Survival underground is inseparable from these broader routines, creating a continuous cycle of adaptation, vigilance, and social negotiation. And as miners walk home through narrow streets, carrying the weight of both coal and fatigue, one lingering thought arises. How did the repeated, uncelebrated labor of ordinary miners, days of endurance, careful observation, and meticulous coordination, shape not only the production of coal, but the broader industrial, social, and economic transformations of Victorian England? How many lives, strategies, and insights remained hidden in the darkness, yet were essential to the functioning of a society increasingly dependent on the subterranean toil of its working class? As the shift ends and miners emerge from the depths, the contrast between the subterranean world and the daylight above is stark. The blackened faces, soot-covered clothes, and aching bodies of workers testify to hours of continuous labor in confined, dangerous spaces. Yet, despite exhaustion, there is a rhythm to this routine, a quiet structure that both organizes daily life and sustains the broader economic and social networks of Victorian Britain. The coal extracted from these mines fuels factories, railways, and homes, making miners' repetitive labor an invisible engine powering the Industrial Revolution. Life underground is a study in endurance and adaptation. The physical demands, swinging pickaxes, hauling coal, shoring up tunnels, require strength, stamina, and careful management of energy. The repetitive nature of the work, combined with constant vigilance for hazards, sharpens both body and mind. Miners develop an intimate understanding of their environment. The texture of coal seams, the sound of shifting rock, and the faint variations in airflow become tools for survival. This knowledge, accumulated over years of repeated effort, is largely invisible to outsiders yet indispensable for safe and efficient operation. Social dynamics within the mine are equally essential. Cooperation, trust, and adherence to informal hierarchies allow multiple workers to navigate dangerous, confined spaces. Experienced hewers mentor apprentices, guiding their technique and teaching the subtleties of reading the seam. Boys and young men perform supporting tasks, learning both skill and discipline while contributing to the overall functioning of the team. Humor, quiet conversation, and small rituals provide brief psychological relief and reinforce a sense of community in an environment dominated by darkness and labor. Economic pressures too shape every decision and action. Miners are frequently paid by the quantity of coal extracted, creating a delicate balance between productivity and safety. Families depend on their wages, which links underground labor directly to survival above ground. The necessity of earning a living intensifies the stakes of each swing of a pickaxe, each cart moved, and each tunnel maintained. Mistakes are costly, not only for the individual but also for the group, reinforcing the importance of discipline, observation, and collective vigilance. Health risks remain constant. Coal dust fills lungs and coats skin, contributing to long-term respiratory problems, skin irritation, and general fatigue. Accidents, sometimes minor but occasionally catastrophic, are a reminder of the mine's inherent danger, yet miners develop strategies to cope, pacing labor, sharing knowledge of hazards, and observing environmental cues. The repetition of work is itself a survival strategy, allowing patterns to become instinctive, errors minimized, and vigilance maintained even under fatigue. Daily routines extend beyond the mine. After emerging into daylight, miners still face tasks that require endurance, coordination, and planning. Equipment must be cleaned and repaired, coal transported or stored, and household responsibilities attended to. The labor underground does not exist in isolation. It is interwoven with domestic work, community obligations, and the broader economic framework of Victorian society. Each miner's daily performance contributes not only to immediate survival, but to the functioning of industrial networks reliant on their labor. The repetition and monotony of mining life create a profound understanding of endurance, patience, and observation. Each day follows a predictable pattern of work, risk, and recovery. Yet within this predictability lies a constant negotiation with uncertainty. Sudden shifts in the seam, unstable rock, or hazardous gas can disrupt even the most careful routine. Survival depends on a combination of skill, vigilance, and social cohesion, a form of expertise built not on prestige or recognition, but on lived experience and collective adaptation. Beyond the immediate tasks, the work of miners has enduring historical significance. The coal they extract powers the machinery of industrial Britain. Factories hum, trains traverse the countryside, and homes remain warm. Yet the individuals responsible for this energy often remain invisible in historical narratives. Their labor, repetitive, demanding, and dangerous, is the foundation upon which economic and technological progress depends. Without their daily endurance, the industrial system would falter, illustrating the hidden human infrastructure behind historical transformation. The mine also fosters an intricate social education. Young miners learn discipline, observation, and resilience, while adults navigate cooperation, mentorship, and leadership. These skills, acquired in darkness and under constant pressure, extend beyond the workplace, shaping families, communities, and broader societal norms. Even in the absence of formal recognition, the collective knowledge and endurance of miners creates social continuity, sustaining both local networks and the broader industrial economy. As evening falls and miners return home, soot-stained and weary, one final reflection emerges. The story of industrial Britain is often told in terms of invention, capital, and grand progress. Yet its foundation rests on the quiet, repetitive labor of ordinary workers who navigated danger, endured monotony, and maintained the machinery of production through vigilance, skill, and cooperation. How many lives, how many careful observations, and how many unrecorded strategies were essential to this system? How many histories remain hidden in the shadows of the mine, recorded only in the muscle memory, skill, and endurance of those who labored daily for survival? The coal miner's life, though repetitive and often unremarkable in the eyes of history, is a testament to human resilience, adaptation, and the invisible labor that sustains societies. Each swing of a pickaxe, each carefully managed cart, and each moment of quiet observation shapes both immediate survival and the broader trajectory of an industrializing world. In this sense, the mine is more than a site of extraction. It is a living laboratory of endurance, social cooperation, and the quiet power of ordinary labor to shape history.